All right, let's continue on with these tough, challenging problems on page 646. Number 4 reads as continuing from number 3, suppose you want your cheerleader to reach a height of at least 25 feet above the ground. What would her initial velocity have to be? Well, after I stopped the last video, I finished number 3. I found out with the parameters that they gave us at a time of 0.9375, which was the vertex, the maximum height is going to be about 18.5 feet. So we want this person to get to be 25 feet above the ground. So what would the velocity have to be? Well, let's go ahead and start. We want the height to be 25. We know this is equal to negative 16t squared, but we don't know what the initial velocity must be, and we still know that she begins at a height of 4.5 feet. So if we subtract the 25 from both sides, we would get negative 16t squared plus v sub naught t minus 20.5 is equal to 0. So far, so good. And then let's go ahead and plop this into the quadratic formula. So t is equal to negative b, well that's weird, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is our unknown, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a. So if you watched the previous video, I told you that if you have a discriminant, what's underneath the radical, if that is less than 0, you cannot take the square root. Your calculator says error. Basically, there are no solutions when you have a discriminant less than 0. So when we look at this, and I had to think about this for a minute, I'm thinking, how in the world do I solve for v sub naught? Well, what we're going to do is we're just going to take the discriminant part of this, and we're going to say this has to be greater than 0 in order for this to occur. So let's just take the discriminant out, which would be our initial velocity squared, and then I already did the math on this. This comes out to be 1,312. This must be greater than 0. If it equals 0, I suppose it could be equal to 0 too. She would just get to 25 feet at equals 0. So this becomes an easier equation for us to solve. When we have only a variable squared and a number, let's add that on to the other side. So v sub naught squared must be greater than or equal to 1,312. And then we would solve this by square rooting both sides, and we would get v sub naught must be greater than or equal to, and I did the math, I think it's 36.22. And that's a velocity, so feet per second. Okay, so the initial velocity on that flyer must be something greater than this in order for her to reach 25 feet.